everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Sphere of Success, where we look at business challenges and adversity and help people. And I know I've been there. You go, why me? Oh my goodness, if it's going to go wrong, it goes wrong with me. Well, actually, you know what? Sometimes these can be from personal experience anyway. Some of the best things that happen to us with the benefit of hindsight, which is always better than when we're looking at. We can't join the dots looking forward. We can only join the dots when we look back. And that's so true because we just can't see where it's headed. But actually, certain things, if we do them in the right way, can actually be the blessings that we very much think, oh, well, that was in disguise, but they can be. And a lady that does join up the dots very effectively with regards to systems and processes, making sure that things are robust and fit for purpose, that there's no things about to break and awful disasters happen, is Lisa Holmes. Now, she owns Sandon Solutions, and her job, her role in life is to make sure that systems are fit for purpose, that she can come in and see the effectiveness of your systems and processes. Are you losing staff because of it? Are you engaging the hearts and minds of your clients and your employees and your stakeholders within the business? And it can be as fundamental as a system and process, because I think we've all waited on that call center queue that your call is important to us. And we think, no, it's not, because I've been on here for 20 minutes. And then you get somebody going, hello, when they've picked up the phone. That's a process that could be changed instantly, but people don't change them. And Lisa's the lady that's able to help you to do that. So, Lisa, welcome to the show. It's lovely to
Hi,
have you.
Lo- lovely to be here.
Oh, bless. So, it would be great to hear how you've gone on your journey from where you've been to now how you set up and why you set up Sandon Solutions.
Um, it, Nobody really needs to know the career history, but I spent 28 years within cleaning and facilities management industry, and a significant part of that was working for a Dutch company. And my MD there allowed me, he appreciated what I brought to the business because I don't fit into a box. And I know that for some people that is a real problem, but for him it wasn't. And he allowed me and gave me the autonomy and the trust to resolve problems that we faced in the business. So as a result of that, sort of anything that came through the door that nobody really knew what to do with would land on my desk. And don't get me wrong, there were times you think, oh, you've got to be kidding me, really? What's this? Um, but actually, that gave me insight into the way that the organization was working in an area that I couldn't necessarily see or didn't have any visual on at that point. It gave me access to clients that I probably wouldn't have had access to because I had no reason to be rummaging around on their side. And it gave me a greater awareness for the problems that our staff were facing out in the field. We had a remote workforce of about 90 or 100 and about 2,000 people on top of that. So most of our workforce was remote. So when you're sat within the luxuries of an office, you you really don't see where the problems are. And I defy anybody to tell me that they do because I didn't see it until I was given this fantastic opportunity over many years to go and make what we were doing more efficient. Yes, more profitable. All businesses are there to make profit. But actually, to our biggest thing was client retention. It costs so much more to go and get new business than it does to retain an existing client. It costs so much more to go and recruit somebody to replace somebody than it does to probably make sure that our staff were happy. And that was the mindset that we had. So we were then bought out 3 years ago, something like that. And not unsurprisingly, the senior team either went of their own accord or went fairly quickly afterwards, which left me with some thought of, okay, what do I do now? So I started off on my own, then got a call from another company, jumped into that, um, and then quickly realized that actually I'm not so good at doing the same thing every day. And those challenges I'd had previously, which were different every day, are the kind of things that brings Lisa to life. And we had a number of deaths of people around us, and I just decided, no, time out. I'm going to go back and do my own thing, which is what I've now done.
Oh, it's everybody's benefit that you have done because we've talked before the show, and it's amazing the depth of skill and the passion that you have in what can be seen as quite a dry section. It's processes, systems, not doesn't light
Uh,
everybody's fire. I personally
no,
absolutely love process and systems. I kind of really relish that level of detail, but that's probably because I think I've not been tested, but I think I might be on the spectrum a little bit with autism, and it really suits my kind of like, oh yeah, I've got to pick this apart and get this done, etc. Create my creativity in that regard. Um, have you had experience of businesses that have had to have processes in place after, let's say, for instance, something bad has happened? We're talking about challenge on this podcast. How do you overcome those things that come from left field? It's not necessarily something that we've been a part of, but then you've got to recalibrate, you've got to get yourself going, you've got to keep a clear head, but then you need the system and the process to be able to get you there. Could you give us an example of, or a few examples of how you've worked or what you would say you would do in scenarios where things have perhaps gone awry and people need
probably
quick
the
help?
probably the biggest one. I spent years being part of a team, and the sales team, we were putting disaster recovery plans into a tender document and all the rest of it. And that disaster recovery plan was probably about a page, maybe too long. It was very short and sweet. And then COVID happened. Most people's disaster recovery plan are probably the best part of 20 pages long now, because I think that was probably the biggest thing where we had to maintain health and safety, as an example, in the cleaning game, which is quite difficult when you can't get on site. We couldn't necessarily go and do quality audits, so we were doing them perhaps differently almost via WhatsApp video, because at least that was live and we could see it, and it didn't involve all of us attending the the office because we couldn't all go to the client site because of the spatial awareness that we were dealing with. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest one. But what we did as a business is say, well, what do we actually need to do? So in that instance, it was we had to comply with the law, I suppose, for want of a better word. It wasn't law; it was the government saying you can do this, you can't do that, and we absolutely applied by all of those rules. But we still need to perform a business. Um, I'm uh, probably a nuisance, really, more than anything, as my last company I'm sure would attest to. So we all have an ISO manual, and it's not a tick box. It's a very clear stamp of approval that we have the quality monitoring or quality systems in place as a business. But I think it's a bit like health and safety. Sometimes it's just got a little bit too unwieldy, and we layer up and layer up and layer up onto it. But in actual fact, rarely does anybody strip it back and say, okay, what do we actually need to do as a business? So I had in the end a very good relationship with the lady that used to deal with us. She was our compliance manager, the antithesis of Lisa Holmes. I need to understand where the rules are, kind of, so I know which ones I can break. And that's sort of, I'm not talking about laws, I'm talking about processes. And okay, I'm aware that there's a process. My question is, does it work? If it works, I'm going to keep doing it. If it doesn't, we either change the process or I'm not going to abide by it, which caused some level of frustration. But actually, it's that change of thought. They go, well, hold on a minute. Why are we saying to ISO in that particular occasion that we will do it? When it came to COVID, I was working for that was the Dutch company. We're going, what do we have to do to comply with the existing regulation, knowing full well that that's likely to change in, I think it was every 2 weeks. We used to get another update from the government, something along those lines. So we stripped the whole thing back to basics here. What can we get away with not doing? And I don't mean that from a client's point of view. I mean in terms of what do we actually not need to do now that we've always done? We might have thought it was necessary, but right now it's not. So we stripped it back to basics. And what we had to do was clean buildings, pure and simple. How do we do that? We need to get deliveries to site. Are those still operating? If not, do we need to go a different way? We've got holiday cover coming up. How is that going to work when we can't have more than so many people? I mean, whilst cleaning staff were seen as the front line, there were still restrictions on things like that. So I think in a long-winded answer to your question, when a disaster happens, it's figure out what the basics are that you need to do to comply. You've got to make sure everyone goes home safely. Without a doubt, that's the ultimate goal. If we didn't clean a toilet so well, that wasn't the biggest thing in the world. But our cleaning staff had to go home safely and without, because what we were finding is that they were getting quite a lot of abuse for being out and about, although they were actually frontline staff and considered frontline staff and were therefore outside of that set of restrictions that you and I might have been under for our hourly daily walk, I think it was. Um, and I think that's the most, it's the same with everything. Cut it back to basics. What do we actually need to do? And then if you can build up on that, that's fine. But then what that does do is it forces the brain to say, okay, we can build up on it, but why are we doing that? Do we need to? Actually, have we ever needed to do this? And that was some of the conversations that we were having. Okay, this is some nice to have, and we've got used to having it. But I'm not sure we need it anymore, boys and girls. And it's having that safe space, but clear processes because it's quite easy to do. And when you're in a boardroom with a number of people in the C-suite, the conversations can go left, right, and centre, and you've got a lot of people with a lot of ideas. That's why they are where they are. But you've got to keep the focus on what's actually needed in that environment where there's been a disaster or a situation that has meant you've had to change.
Mm. And it's being objective in that decision. Do we still need to do this?
Yeah.
Um, and what the implications are of not doing it.
We had somebody, sadly, he has since passed away, but we engaged with him to help with our strategy. And he had this wonderful way, and it, I loved watching my colleagues on the board. Some of them felt quite uncomfortable with this. You go, okay, what if you had to do it by next Friday? Yeah, but we can't. No, 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 no. What if you had to do it by next Friday? What would you need? How would you do it? And it's almost the minute you take away all of those restrictions that we're so used to, well, there's finance, you've got to get the PO and blah, 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 you've got to sign off with the MD. No, 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 none of that. What would you need? And that's almost the critical thing that you're talking about here. If you take away all the usual gibberish that we go through to get something done, no, you need it by next Friday. What have you got to do? And it took about probably a couple of hours for people to get out of the mindset of, well, we need this. No, you don't. You don't need that. And actually, then the ideas that were flowing there, you think, this is brilliant. I mean, the boss was sitting there going, this is going to cost me a fortune. So then we had to tie it back, and for all the right reasons. But what the guy was doing was spot on. It was just making us think in an entirely different way. You've got a deadline. You can't think. So to your critical thing, it's a unique way of doing things, and I'd happily get involved in anything again like that because what he did really challenged myself included, the way that we've always thought.
And here we go, is the challenge, isn't it? It's sometimes the challenge we think is going to be the big, scary, hairy thing that's going to be awful. But sometimes the smaller challenges that really press our buttons, that really trigger us out of a new mindset, out of the old mindset into a new one. And it's nobody's fault because human beings don't like change. We like consistency.
Yeah,
We like to do what we've always done because it gives us a rhythm and we've got something that we know and
yeah.
it's nice, it's comfortable. But that turbulence, that disruption, you said that you benefited from it. With the instance, if anybody's thinking, oh, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't know how well that would go down well with my senior team or even any team within the business, um, what was the result of doing that? What was the benefit? What was the value of having gone through that bit of uncomfortable environment to actually come through? What did you see happening afterwards?
The point of engaging him was to help us put a 5-year strategy together. And we sort of turned it on its head in terms of, okay, what are the four, I can't remember what we called them now, and this sat with me to then manage 4 key points at the end in whatever the year was. We want to have achieved this. Then you step back. So to have achieved that, we have to have done this. To have done that, we have to have done that. And we work backwards on that. And then you start seeing how it all crisscrosses. Um, I I don't exactly remember how that fitted in with all the strategy because we're going back probably 6, 7 years now, but for sure, that part of it stands out in my mind in terms of the way he challenged us in a nice way. And he never took any messing. If somebody was procrastinating, he'd pull them straight back, which I thought was great. And you can do that with an external person. There's no emotion there. There's no familiarity. There's just a case, look, boys and girls, I'm here to do a job. So you're going to do it my way because you've engaged with me to do it. For him, it worked very well in that environment and it helped us focus to put the strategy together. And then we were talking about other things as well. So, if and you mentioned it earlier, there's, people don't like change. There is a bell curve for, I can't remember who did it now, who on how people deal with change and the various processes they go through. And I think it's one of those key points to remember. So if something has happened that has caused your business to fundamentally change or whatever, don't plug something just to prove you've done it. It's far better to do one change and make it, yeah, much for sure, make it significant. But that's one process that everybody has to go through rather than, okay, let's plug that gap. And then another one comes up over there. So then you're plugging that one and then another one comes up over there because you've not thought it through. And then you end up in a period of 18 months with constant change and people get fed up and they leave because then there's no clarity of direction. Um,
Very important point that you allude to here is purpose. Does it fit with the purpose of what we're here to do?
mm,
Is this the purpose? Because there's so many great minds in business. We've all got wonderful team members who are very creative.
yeah,
We could be very creative, and we come up and we have to, I think, always go, well, actually, you know what? Is this headed towards our purpose? Or is it, as wonderful as it is, going to take
yeah.
us off on a tangent?
And then I think, and this is maybe the role of the CEO, every company has a vision, mission, whatever it's called. There's a set of criteria that most companies are working towards. So if you're making a set of changes, does that change align with the vision? Because again, if it doesn't, and to all intents and purposes, and this is another thing that I think some companies do really badly, is the communication. Well, we don't need to tell everybody because they won't understand. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, you do need to tell them. You just need to find a way of explaining it to all levels so that everyone understands and how it fits within their role. Because if they see on the wall, our vision is X, and then some directive comes out, well, we're doing Y, and they're kind of going, well, all right, well, those two don't match. So now there's a misalignment, and now there's a case of, well, I'm doing this today, but is it going to be the same tomorrow? And if that constantly changes, people lose faith in the business. And then productivity starts dropping off, sickness levels go up, people leave, and all those kind of things. And it's not a big doom story. It doesn't happen en masse. And it's not one of those things that you can necessarily measure via P&L either.
Mm,
And that tends to be the one standard measurement tool that all industries have, all organizations have. None of that features on a P&L. We don't look at the costs for employment. We don't look at the costs for training. We might charge the client for those things, but where they show on a P&L are probably fundamentally different things. And I don't have a problem with any of that. It's for me, it's more about the time and the cost that is not measurable that happens and the loss of productivity. And you're changing for the sake of, well, you might not need to.
mm.
Or actually, you might need a small change and it just needs the one, but it needs to, yeah, the communication needs to be far better across the organization. I think that's where a number of organizations let themselves down.
Do you put in processes and systems to aid with clarity of communications within a business?
Um, I would certainly advise them because I think it's key. And throughout my life, I've heard some people say, well, somebody doesn't need to know that. I'm thinking, they do. They're an employee. It's important to them. And there's that wonderful thing, if you know something well enough, you can explain it to anybody. So if a massive change is coming, people need to understand how it impacts on them. And yes, by all means, you may need to give a bit of a a dodgy sandwich to them, in the way I refrain from using the word that everyone knows, or it may be something very different. But change is going to be good for some and not good for others. Completely understand that. But if it's clear and there's an end product and you get to the end, you go, right, okay, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate all the hard work that everyone's gone to. We are now where we wanted to be. We have achieved success. Thank you very much. Little bonuses don't go, never knowingly undersold as it is, but um, you set a timeline, be clear with everybody, take everyone through that timeline and get to the end and go, okay, we're done now. We're business as usual. Thank you. And then nobody mentioned the change word anymore, because otherwise it just becomes like this huge, big, wet, soggy blanket that nobody can really get themselves out of. And why would you go and work in an environment that makes you feel like that?
Oh, absolutely. Where it's driven by process. I mean, we should always be adopting the process as opposed to looking at people and where they've gone wrong. Is the process fit for purpose?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'd love to hear from you is your thoughts on how often do you think a review of process within an organization should take place for optimum effectiveness?
Wow. Okay. I guess I'm not a huge fan of reviewing for reviewing's sake. And the minute you put something in the ISO manual means you have to do it every year or something. So it's the way technology is moving at the moment. I would say everything probably needs to be looked at once a year, once every 18 months. But that is purely because everything is changing so fast. We've spoken. You buy a laptop, you take it out the store, it's out of date. So review it, and that review can be as simple as, do you know what? It's fine. We've reviewed it, we move on. It doesn't need to be a massive, great program about it, because the minute you say everything needs to be reviewed, again, you can see people's shoulders duck down and everyone's trying desperately hard to get out of doing it, and I don't blame them. But the review could be a simple case of 4 or 5 people going, do you know what? We've had no complaints. It's still providing our end goal, which is X. If that end goal's changed and is now Y, then you need to do a deeper review, because what worked for your clients 12, 18 months ago may not be working for them now. And it is really difficult because, most companies will have some quality audit system of some description, and that audits your process or your system or your service delivery or your product delivery, or, whatever it is. And you may have KPIs that you're measured against those elements every month or every quarter. But not everything comes up through the KPI report. It's also about the relationships that you have with your customers. And those, whilst not reportable necessarily, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that every client meeting you go to, there's a report that goes up to the to satisfy the ISO audit or ISO manual. But what I'm saying is there's an underlying level of feedback that organisations get that they maybe aren't aware of or act on, and those are equally they should be balanced against what you do see, which is the KPI, which is a number. We're all used to seeing numbers. They sit very happily in Excel spreadsheets. Lisa's happy, and on we go. But there are other things that don't sit in a spreadsheet that are just as important and need to be monitored. But I desperately don't want businesses to go down the route of, well, we need to put a process in place, stick that in your ISO manual, and then bog down especially your remote workforce with yet more reports. That's not the purpose of this at all. It's just find the most effective way for your business to get traction on those bits of feedback, those little nuggets of information that you're not going to get in a month-end KPI report.
This is a very good question to expand on because this whole nugget element, how do you think it's best to gain this information that can be really helpful to drive the sustainability of a process or to tweak something that could be enhanced? I'm thinking from the point of view of having been in business development for a long time, the expense report on a Sunday literally used to take
Mhm.
sometimes 4 or 5 hours of your Sunday doing your
Wow.
expense report. And it was just so crushingly awful, knowing that that was the only time you had to do it. Everything then needed to be in midnight on Sunday. And that in itself used to put a whole dampener on the weekend because you
I
just
bet.
knew that you needed that time to be able to do it. And what I would have appreciated is the powers that be is actually to come to the team and said, is there anything in your job that is actually causing
Yeah,
you an issue that we could actually eliminate or think about doing something that was more able to free you up of some time? What do you think on a consistent basis employers can do to actually gain those nuggets of information without burdening the staff even more? Because people are like, yeah, 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 whatever. Because then you've really got to act on that and actually do something about it. But
yeah.
in your regard, what have you deployed? What have you seen happening in your past career that really worked?
So, well, I suppose a couple of things. We engaged with staff surveys, and I can feel people's hackles going up at the very mere mention of those words, and I completely agree with it. But I only agreed to do it um, for one reason, and that was that any feedback we got, we acted on. I said, listen, I'll happily run this project, but I'm not putting my name to it unless we're going to do anything with the feedback we get. I was promised we would, and we did. So there is a point where you get something anonymously. Some things you have to act on fairly immediately, and other things you think, actually, no, this is a good point. If we know who it's come from and they're prepared to put pen to paper, let me go and talk to them. Let me go and have a cup of coffee with them and see what this is all about. Essentially, human beings, if I say something to you and it's a bit of a problem for me, and and you take that off as my line manager and come back and say, do you know what, Lisa? I was listening to you and I think I've solved the problem. This is what we're going to do now. How do you feel about that? And I'm going to sit there and go, okay, well, then I trust you for a start. You've taken my problem. There's no negative feedback coming at Lisa because Lisa said X, because that environment doesn't help. My work is a lot easier, or the problem, you've taken my problem away. People like to feel that they're heard, and being listened to and heard are two fundamentally different things as well. So, and there is always a thing at which I think even with the staff survey, no company can pick up all of the whinges. You just can't do it. You're going to go down that route. You're going to have a team of people that are whinge solvers. I don't know what you call them, but you can't do it. But you can be seen to change some of the problems. So what I then did was email out to everybody that had completed the survey and those that hadn't. I said, listen, this is the feedback, no names, no pack drill. These are the problems that we've picked up. I will come back to you in 3 months' time. And I did go back to them in 3 months' time. Some of those things I said, I'm really sorry. We can't do anything about this at the moment, but here's a very brief reason why. But here are the other things that we have acted on. And the feedback I got after that was at least we feel listened to. Fully appreciate that no business is going to, just because I say we should do that on a Wednesday rather than a Thursday, doesn't mean it should be done on a different day. But at least you came back to me and said, well, actually, so there's a reason why it's done on that day, which nobody ever had done before. I think what came out of that also was whereas businesses think somebody has been trained to do something, just have a rethink on that. Because what you've probably got is a trainer system, and it doesn't work. We ended up with all sorts of problems in payroll because we'd adopted exactly that. And you cannot mess around with people's payroll. You know, these are cleaning colleagues who are paid by the hour, and if they work 2 hours, they need to be paid for 2 hours. But the problems we were facing was purely down to training. And so, but to your problem about the expenses, I sort of feel your pain. It's never taken me 4 hours, but certainly I've had outmoded principles. And you're right. And if somebody had come to me and said, "What can I do to make this easier?" then we could have talked about it and found a way that met with the company needs, because assumedly you were getting paid at a certain time of the week for your expenses. So therefore they had to be in on a certain date. Okay, get all of that, but how can we make this easier? And it's those small little networks within an organization that just make things work so much more smoothly, in my opinion.
Yeah. How do you, thank you for that, Lisa. With the idea of people coming up with ideas within the organization, I always think it's a measure of an organization's people's level of commitment, enjoyment when they're actually creative thinking of how we can do things better, improve things, etc. How we can do more with less, or just making suggestions in general as to a happy working environment.
Mm.
How do you encourage that? Because that can be a real source of inspiration as far as, okay, we'll adopt this process, we'll get this system in place.
Um, Interestingly, I we used to clean. I better hadn't mentioned them, but a well-known internet brand, well, no, a well-known computer brand, and they had like a think tank room. I can best describe it as, and it was described to me as. I mean, I'm walking there thinking, how are we going to clean this? Soft, comfy cushions, bean bags all over the place. Think notepads in those days. It was basically a place for people to go and just get ideas out onto a whiteboard of some description. I'm sure it's all changed. It's all tech now. This was about 10, 15 years ago. But I remember thinking, if you have a safe space, this is a real space where people can go and just get your ideas out. That was fine. That was the nature of the beast. And it employed people that probably thought that way. So it probably worked very well for them. Most organizations can't hive off a space, or maybe they can now because there's less footfall in the office. But so we don't need to do it that way. What we can have is like drop-in sessions, which is kind of our version of it, if you like. And there was coffee and biscuits and the usual things. And it was a case of look, come in, have a chat, see what's new, give us your ideas. You don't have to, you can just kind of say hello. But we kept certain people out of that area for no other reason than perhaps we thought they might have felt uncomfortable with them sitting there. Because there's still this can't say that in front of the MD kind of thing, can't say that in front of the CEO. So we kept them out. Um, and humour is a great leveler. And the minute you introduce, number one, the brain takes on a lot more information. This goes back to my CIPD course. If you're laughing, you are more likely to remember whatever it was that you were talking about.
Mm.
It's a strange phenomenon, but I don't know why. So if we sort of brought it back down, it was very open. I'd be there for 2 or 3 hours, and yeah, people would come in or they wouldn't. And sometimes I was Billy No Mates. It's fine. It was still there, but the important thing is to keep these things going. And then there was feedback. There was this is probably before the world of Teams. Yes, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So we weren't using Teams at that point. But now you set it up there. So we've had these ideas. So this is what we're working. And then you've got like a whiteboard almost with it within the Teams environment, and you can keep it all going, and everybody's got access to that. And then the feedback that I had is that I don't mind that you haven't done something about my problem because I know you've solved somebody else's problem. So I feel listened to. And I was kind of okay. I'm not sure I'm necessarily equipped to deal with that. That's more of an HR thing, maybe, because actually the person had felt quite upset about it. Not because I hadn't listened to them, but because they suddenly felt that actually somebody was being listened to, and for reasons I perhaps didn't understand, they were getting quite emotional about it. Comes back to I think what we were saying earlier. You don't really know what's going on in somebody's life, but we employ all of these people. But it was a positive thing. It was absolutely a positive experience. But you can't please everyone all the time, but you can put in place things that the business can sustain. So I could do that every couple of weeks. So I don't remember the frequency now. Um, and over a period of time, people got used to it and they knew it was there. And they go, oh, yeah, I'm going to have a chat with Lisa. And I even heard people saying, it's like silly things. How many times have we all walked past somebody and they just slam the phone down? Why doesn't X ever just do what I want them to do? And in the end, I turned around and said, have you ever asked them what you want? I said, you had this exact same expletive, for want of a better word, about a year ago. So assumedly you've done nothing with it since then. And unless you change it, in a year's time, you're going to be slamming the phone down going, why can't so-and-so just do something? So these little sessions kind of helped. And there's a point where I was picking up things that I perhaps shouldn't have been picking up and then dealing with them because they just need to be put down like that. But it opened up the door to it, which it hadn't been before. I
Well,
think
the
that's the most
interesting thing is,
important.
thank you. You've just described a process.
Yeah.
If that person adopted a different process, they would get a
Yeah.
different outcome. And a lot of behavior can be distilled if we're getting pretty riled or
Mm,
excited out of, sort of not positive excitement. If we adopt a process that we know that we can follow to navigate those feelings,
mm,
it's just like it then dissolves because you're getting into it, you're asking questions about your thoughts and feelings. And ultimately, if you're getting the same result the whole time, you've got to be able to change to get a different one. It's the law of insanity, isn't it? And the
it
other thing
is.
is you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. So
No.
ultimately, you need to change the way in which you're thinking about things to be able to solve the problem that was created in the first place by the exact thoughts and actions. So,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science. And this is why I love process, is because if you know that you follow a pathway, a journey of a process down to its logical conclusion, as long as the ego doesn't step in the way and go, well, actually, I want to be like that. We see the benefit of it at the end of the day as
Yeah.
to why would that mean if I could change the way that I reacted and put something in place to elicit a different response,
Mm.
problem solved.
And from a psychological point of view, you can't change what comes at you, but you can change your response.
Absolutely.
And there are,
Absolutely.
you've just gone through a number of expressions there yourself. The other one, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, which is really difficult to say after a couple of glasses of wine. But it is so true. So, and that's why I just looked at this person that was slamming the phone down, thinking, this is deja vu. Why are you still doing the same thing?
Yeah, and
Because on
causing
the
yourself all
bottom,
that aggro anyway and feeling like that. Yeah.
bonkers. But you think, actually, do you know what, Deborah? If it's happening there, it would have been happening everywhere else in the business as well, because it's never just an isolated thing. And I think that's what drove me to think, okay, this is lunacy. Can we just make life a lot easier in the workplace? We spend so many hours a week in this office or another office at work. Let's make them fun. They can't all be fun. We've all got to do things that are a bit grindy, but let's make most of it as fun as we can. Let's get the most out of our working environment that we possibly can. Ultimately, the business is only going to benefit from that because if you've got people that are enjoying what they're doing, they will most likely put more into it, and your end goal is far greater than it would have been before. And again, it's the first thing the finance director does is, and quite rightly so, is looks at the P&L, and it's not always measurable there. There are, and there's absolutely that is a fundamentally good place to start, but it's not the only place to start in terms of how your business is looking to the customer.
Well, from my point of view, if people are having fun at work, you're more likely to turn up. So less absenteeism. When you're there, you're more likely
Yep.
to be present because if you're not
Mm,
engaged, well, what are you doing? So the
yeah.
productivity, etc., improves, the relationships improve, the ideas start to flow more, relationships start strengthened, etc. So from small beginnings, actually over time, those little increments can actually have a very positive effect that then ends up being measurable to the bottom line.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh yeah, I mean, we
Maybe a
did
good
this
point.
sort of stuff in. I won't go into my career history now; it's not the place. But international operational management consultancy that I was involved with a number of years, and ultimately, we always look at incremental change as being one of the most valuable exercises that a business can actually do. It's all right having the whistles and bells, massive big change program. That's
Mm,
fantastic. But you know what? Sometimes the biggest impacts can come from the most innocuous of places. And a
yeah.
lot of it, if you do, as you rightly said, if one person's doing that, you can guarantee it's being done all over the business because that's an endemic behavior.
Do you
And
know?
nobody actually, and I've been guilty of it before, so I don't speak as a perfect person, not at all.
Mm,
But you do these things and you don't question it. It's like, why
mm,
am I behaving like that? Well, so because that's the thing. That's why I say anybody who's listening to this, have a chat with Lisa because you are an objective person that can see
yeah.
these things. You can see the wood for the trees.
Mm,
And what is normal behavior that most people would see as unseen and it's just habitual? You can go in and go, actually, guys, there's a different way you can do this. And people go,
all human
really?
beings, most human beings will respond in a fairly similar way, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the better thing is to do is to understand that and then use that knowledge in a positive way to make the changes that you need to make to your business.
I love
But I
it.
think
I
it,
think, yeah.
as you've said, it's not rocket science. It never is.
No, as I say, we were just talking about, the beauty of simplicity. It doesn't have to be
Mm,
whistles and bells and complicated for it to be valuable. It can be very simple, but that simple thing isn't necessarily easy to
no,
find. Simple doesn't necessarily equate to being easy, but if people can see the benefit that they'd get, and it's always, that what's in it for me scenario, is if you can see the benefit of something and adopting something that's slightly different and maybe pushed to a little bit of uncomfortable feeling, but when you've got used to
yeah.
that, the benefit is just like, oh gosh, I wish we'd done this years ago.
And there's a very, I think there's a couple of things I've seen on Stephen Bartlett's podcast recently. Look back at where you've come from, because actually that retrospectiveness is phenomenal. If you look back as an industry or in your organization where you were having problems a year ago, you think, oh, we're not having those. And they have, because the changes, if they happen incrementally, you don't necessarily see them happening, but it's a really good thing to just look back and go, do you know, we've come so far. And then, there's a comms piece around that for sure within an organization to make everyone feel valued. And that's actually that's the right way. But it's well worth just remembering where you started.
Oh,
That's for
absolutely.
sure.
I think it might have been Steve Jobs that said, sorry if I've attributed it to the wrong person, but he always said
Mm.
you can't join the dots looking forward. You can only join the
Yeah,
dots looking back.
you can.
And I'm pretty sure it was him that said it. And so true,
Mm,
because you can't tell the future. Well, you can kind of predict it if you know how certain things are working. If you do this well, it's kind of going to produce this results. But when you see something on a new trajectory and you just say, and you look back,
yeah.
often people quite, I do this with the team all the time. And I say, you remember when you started a year ago and now what
Mm,
you're doing? And they go, oh, goodness.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It's
Because,
quite it's quite
yeah,
powerful actually, isn't it?
me too. I mean, I look at things and you'd never know that a year ago I was petrified of speaking in front of the camera. It's
Really?
like,
Wow. Okay.
and it's just like, well, that's changed. That's
And now it's
changed.
your day-to-day life, isn't it?
Do you know? So it's just like, the repetition of it and the getting comfortable and
Yeah.
then honing your skill. And I think from what you're saying, in business, those processes and systems, let's have a look. Is there a bit of a clean out? Is there a little bit of agitation we need to go through to
Yeah.
push us into the next new normality,
Mm,
as it were? So
yeah.
yeah, Lisa, thank you so much. How can
Thank
people get
you.
hold of you?
Either by email or by LinkedIn. I think you've got the details there. Either way is great.
Oh,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Yes, it'll all go on the show notes so everybody can get hold of you. And yeah, it's been lovely to listen to your insight. As I say, do have a chat with Lisa. She has got vast amounts of life experience that actually can be brought into play from wonderful organizations that she's worked with as well, that may just be that objective viewpoint that you just thinking, yeah, we do need somebody to cast their eye over something which
Mm,
having that other person talk to somebody gets you out of that heated environment or what have you. It's not personal anymore, and you can get a lot from speaking to Lisa. So thank you again. It's been
thank
lovely to
you.
have
Thank
you.
you very much.
Okay, and everybody listening, here's to a very successful few days, and see you all again very soon. Please do. We couldn't do this without your support and your generosity and listening and sharing. So please do share, like, and comment and subscribe to the channel because then that gets it out to people that this may absolutely resonate with and also yourselves. Do be in touch. Okay, take care.
Okay,
Speak to you
bye.
soon. Bye now. Bye now.